on Canto 3, Chapter 15, text number 46. Okay, so it says, the Kumaras said, our dear, you are not manifested to rascals, even though you are seated within the heart of everyone. But as far as we are concerned, we see you face to face, although you are unlimited. The statements we have heard about you from our father Brahma through the ears have now been actually realized by your kind appearance. Prabhupada ki jai. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The so-called yogis who concentrate their mind or meditate upon the impersonal or void are described here. The verse of Srimad Bhagavatam describes persons who are expected to be very expert yogis engaged in meditation, but who do not find the Supreme Personality Godhead seated within the heart. These persons are described here as Duratma, which means a person who has a very crooked heart or a less intelligent person, just opposite to Mahatma, which means one who has a broad heart. Those so-called yogis who, although engaged in meditation, are not broad-hearted, cannot find the four-handed Narayana form, even though he is seated within their heart. Although the first realization of the Supreme Absolute Truth is in impersonal Brahman, one should not remain satisfied with experiencing the impersonal effulgence of the Supreme Lord. In the Isho Upanishad also, the devotee prays that the glaring effulgence of Brahman may be removed from his eyes so that he can see the real personal feature of the Lord and thus satisfy himself. Similarly, although the Lord is not visible to the beginning in the beginning because of his glaring bodily effulgence, if a devotee sincerely wants to see him, the Lord is revealed to him. It is said in Bhagavad Gita that the Lord cannot be seen by our imperfect eyes. He cannot be heard by our imperfect ears, and he cannot be experienced by our imperfect senses. But if one engages in devotional service with faith and devotion, then God reveals himself. Here, the four sages, Sanat Kumara, Sanatana, Sanandana, and Sanaka, are described as actually sincere devotees. Although they had heard from their father, Brahma, about the personal feature of the Lord, only the impersonal feature, Brahman, was revealed to them. But because they were sincerely searching for the Lord, they finally saw his personal feature directly, which corresponded with the description given by their father. They thus became fully satisfied. Here they expressed their gratitude because although they were foolish impersonalists in the beginning, by the grace of the Lord, they could now have the good fortune to see his personal feature. Another significant aspect of this verse is that the sages describe their experience of hearing from their father, Brahma, who was born of the Lord directly. In other words, the disciplic succession from the Lord to Brahma and from Brahma to Narada and from Narada to Vyasa and so on is accepted here because the Kumaras were sons of Brahma. They had the opportunity to learn Vedic knowledge from the disciplic succession of Brahma, and therefore, in spite of their impersonal beginnings, they became, in the end, direct seers of the personal feature of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. So by proper guidance of a spiritual master, one can gradually go from realization of the impersonal Brahman to understanding the existence of Paramatma in the heart of everyone, and eventually understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly. Now, by deity worship, you get a chance to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead directly. But there are different ways of seeing the Supreme Lord. So, one way is the gradual process, and another way is directly. Both end up in the same, you get the same darshan of the Lord, but one is more slower process, and the other is direct process. So it says here, the four sages, Sanat Kumara, Sanatana, Sanandana, and Sanaka, are described as actually sincere devotees. Although they had heard from their father Brahma about the personal feature of the Lord, only the impersonal feature Brahman was revealed to them. Well, that's because one may not have knowledge of the personal form of the Lord. So they can gradually be, let's say, trained to go from the impersonal Brahman realization all the way up to Paramatma realization, and then eventually Bhagavan realization. So it says here, although they had heard from their father Brahma about the personal feature of the Lord, only the impersonal feature Brahman was revealed to them. But because they were sincerely searching for the Lord, they finally saw his personal feature directly, which corresponded with the description given by their father. They thus became fully satisfied. Here they expressed their gratitude because although they were foolish and personalists at the beginning, by the grace of the Lord, they could now have the good fortune to see his personal. Another significant aspect of this verse is that the sages describe their experience of hearing from their father Brahma, who was born of the Lord directly. In other words, the disciplic succession from the Lord to Brahma, and from Brahma to Narada, and from Narada to Vyasa, and so on, is accepted here because the Kumaras were sons of Brahma. They had the opportunity to learn Vedic knowledge from the disciplic succession of Brahma. And therefore, in spite of their impersonalist beginnings, they became in the end direct seers of the personal feature of the Lord. Now, most people begin with the impersonal realization of God or some kind of impersonal realization. But if they have the right association, they can gradually rise to full understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his transcendental form of Shyamasundara. That's because you have to be a sincere searcher for the Lord. And it says here, but because they were sincerely searching for the Lord, they finally saw his personal feature directly, which corresponded with the description given by their father, Lord Brahma. They thus became fully satisfied. Here they expressed their gratitude because although they were foolish impersonalists in the beginning, so you see, the impersonalists are described here as being foolish. Why? Because they avoid meditating on the transcendental form of the Lord. Where the Kumaras, they were, they had heard about the transcendental form of the Lord or the personal feature of the Lord. But and they began by just having the impersonal realization of the Lord, the Brahman realization revealed to them. But because they were sincerely searching for the Lord, they finally saw his personal feature directly, which corresponded with the description given by their father. Okay, so that means that you have to just like if, let's say, you're looking at an advertisement to go from here to Montreal. So there's some kind of magazine, especially if you sit, get a flight. They always have these magazines, and every month or every couple of months they highlight another place you can go to, right? So uh, one time I was on a flight and I opened that magazine up and it said, go to Montreal and be happy. So everything looks really nice. They have these glossy magazine and they show you people. They're all and they look happy and they're drinking liquor in a bar, and the bar has 500 different bottles of different types of intoxicating liquors, and everybody looks happy.
Speak houses,
Yeah, that's also that. Yeah.
casino pictures.
Yes. So they say, go to Montreal and be happy. Now, when you get to Montreal, they have magazines there. They say, go to Seattle and be happy. And then again, you see, people in a bar, all smiles in Seattle. So this is all nonsense, of course. Whereas here we see there is such a thing as revelation theology, and gradual, let's say, advancement from the impersonal to the personal realization of the Lord due to the sincerity of the devotee. So it says here, but because they were sincerely searching for the Lord, they finally saw his personal feature directly, which corresponded with the description given by their father. Now, that's a very important statement. That corresponded with the description given by their father, Brahma. So, first you hear about Krishna from a bona fide devotee, not from some nonsense Mayavadi uh, who's always talking about Nirakar, Nirakar, Nirakar. There's no form. We're always talking about there's no form, God. God is formless. That, of course, is nonsense. He can uh, uh, seem to be formless for those people who are not really devotees, but his actual form is the most beautiful Sham Sundar, three bending form of the Lord, holding the flute and with peacock feather. So, um, so the four Kumaras, they had heard from their father Brahma about the personal feature of the Lord, uh, but only the impersonal Brahman was revealed to them. But because they were sincerely searching for the Lord, they finally saw his personal feature directly, which corresponded with the description given by their father. So, in other words, we need to hear first about Krishna, and if we're sincere about serving Krishna, then eventually we'll be able to see Krishna. Right now, of course, today you can just walk in the temple and see Krishna, right? Deity there. But to see him with love and devotion, that's another thing. And actually, when we go to the temple, it's so that Krishna can see you, not that you can see him. The seer is the enjoyer, right? So when we go to the temple, we shouldn't go there to be the enjoyer. We should go there to be enjoyed by the Lord, which means we go there nicely dressed with tilak and we bow down and we chant mantras for the Lord, glorifying him. And now he's pleased by seeing us. And then he can give his benediction to us. If you never go to the temple, Well, Krishna is everywhere, of course, but he's also in the temple in his original form, and you can see him, but more importantly, he can see us. That's much more important. Uh, the because when he sees us, he blesses us. It says, but because they, meaning the Kumaras, were sincerely searching for the Lord, they finally saw his personal feature directly, which corresponded with the description given by their father. That's important. We begin by hearing. Uh, we don't really see with our eyes, we see with our ears. And if you hear from a bona fide person and you follow the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, then you'll be able to see Krishna also as he was described by the teacher. And then you know that you're not being cheated by some Mayavadi or some impersonalist. So, but because they were sincerely searching for the Lord, they finally saw his personal feature directly, which corresponded with the description given by their father. Thus, they became fully satisfied. Here, they expressed their gratitude because although they were foolish and personless in the beginning, by the grace of the Lord, they can now have the good fortune to see his personal feature. Another significant aspect of this verse is that the sages describe their experience of hearing from their father Brahma, who was born of the Lord directly. In other words, the disciplic succession from the Lord to Brahma, and from Brahma to Narada, and from Narada to Vyasa, and so on, is accepted here. Because the Kumaras were sons of Brahma, they had the opportunity to learn Vedic knowledge from the disciplic succession of Brahma. And therefore, in spite of their impersonalist beginnings, they became, in the end, direct seers of the personal feature of the Lord. Almost everybody begins, when they talk about God, they begin to have first an impersonalist concept. Like, well, in Islam, you're not allowed to make any depiction or any picture of God. They don't allow it. Why? Because uh, how can you draw a picture of God? You understand? So they don't think that's possible, and so therefore it'll only be something that is, uh, let's say, what do we call, based on the speculation. So don't even go there. They don't even go there. So when you do walk into a Muslim temple, you don't see anybody. I mean, you see people, but you don't see anything. It's not like the temple. You go to the temple, you see all the deities. They don't have deities. All they have is some kind of thing in the wall that indicates to you the way you should bow down facing toward Makkah, right? So that they have, but there's no form of God. They're basically impersonalists, right? Uh, and because they don't believe that you can, uh, make a statue or a picture of God. They forbid it. Let's put it like that. They forbid it because otherwise people will start, speculating. And why is that? Because they don't have anything in their shastra that explains the form of God. That's the whole point. If they had that information, then they would make some representation, but they don't have that information. Why? Because they're not advanced enough spiritually. So if they come to our temple, they can advance spiritually and now have not only description, but actually vision of the Supreme Personality Godhead, Krishna, in his glorious form in the temple. So we see how we're very fortunate. Whereas the Muslims, you go into their temple, there's no deity there. There's just something on the wall that indicates, you should pray, in that direction because that's where Makkah is. uh, that's very interesting. Okay, um, so it's important that when we begin our spiritual life, it should be uh, in what's called the Brahma Madhva Sampradaya. What is a Sampradaya? It's a disciplic succession. It's going from Krishna originally all the way down through a series of pure devotees till today. So there are four bona fide spiritual lineages, and we are in the Brahma uh, lineage. That means that Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita to Brahma, and then Brahma spoke to his disciples, and it comes down to us today. And then there's the Kumara Sampradaya. Krishna speaks to the four Kumaras. We're reading about it right now. And then they have that Sampradaya, or that disciplic succession. And there's the Sri Sampradaya. Krishna spoke to Sri, or the eternal consort of Krishna. And then her Sampradaya came, right? So this way, there's different lineages that are bona fide lineages. And then there's a whole bunch of so-called lineages that are not bona fide. They make some kind of lineage up, like the Brahma Kumaris. Their lineage starts by someone called I forget. Well, they say he's actually Brahma, but it's not the Brahma we're talking about. It's another Brahma. Uh, so you see, in India, it's every hodgepodge concept possible. India is full of speculation. It's unbelievable, all the different speculative movements they have there. But they also have Krishna consciousness. So we are fortunate not to be, let's say, directed toward all these false lineages that are existing in India, and be in the Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, or this spiritual lineage. Okay, so text 47. We know you are the supreme absolute truth, personality of Godhead, who manifests his transcendental form in the uncontaminated mode of pure goodness. This transcendental, eternal form of your personality can be understood only by your mercy through unflinching devotional service, by great sages whose hearts have been purified in the devotional way. That's a very nice verse. This explains how you can see God. How can you see God? Well, uh, first of all, this verse is um, emphatically saying that God has a form, an eternal form, and not some temporary form. And it's understood by people like us if we have unflinching devotional service. Now, unflinching means it's continual. It's not stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. It's unstoppable devotional service. And And it says here that this transcendental eternal form of your personality can be understood only by your mercy through unflinching devotional service by great sages whose hearts have been purified in a devotional way. So, okay, let's look at this word devotional or devotion. Why don't you look that up in the dictionary? It means that you're very reverent, you have tremendous respect, and you always bow down and there's humility to the deity. And let me see what it says here.
Dictionary meaning is
Yeah,
love, loyalty, enthusiasm for a person, activity, or cause.
yes, that's pretty good. So, yeah, in our case, it's for a person, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, when it says in Sanskrit, Drita Bhakti Yoga, that means unflinching devotional service. Ud agrantaya, without attachment or free from material bondage. Hridi, in the heart. Vidu, understood. So great sages understand how. It says here, this transcendental eternal form of your personality can be understood only by your mercy through unflinching devotional service by great sages whose hearts have been purified in the devotional way. Well, we're going to hear what the devotional way is, but it's through unflinching devotional service. So, purport by Srila Prabhupada. The absolute truth can be understood in three features: impersonal, Brahman, localized Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So impersonal Brahman is the light that's emanating from the body of Krishna. So you don't see Krishna's form, but you see the light that's emanating from his body. It's blinding. And then localized Paramatma, when it says localized, it means it's in your heart. The Paramatma feature of Krishna is in the heart of everyone. And it is possible through meditation and through austerities to see the Paramatma. And then Bhagavan, the three-form bending form of Sham Sundar, most beautiful vision of the Lord, can also be seen, but that's through pure devotion over a long period of time. Eventually, you can see the Bhagavan form of the Lord. Here it is admitted that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the last word in understanding the absolute truth. Now, see, this is something that impersonalists don't really accept. And what is that? That there is an absolute truth, and it's the last word. In other words, there's nothing beyond the transcendental form of Krishna. So even though the four Kumaras were instructed by the great learned father Brahma, they could not actually understand the absolute truth. They could only understand the supreme absolute truth when they personally saw the personality of Godhead. Oh, 1 second. They could only understand the supreme absolute truth when they personally saw the personality of Godhead with their own eyes. In other words, if one sees or understands the supreme personality Godhead, the other two features of the absolute truth, namely impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma, are also automatically understood. Therefore, the Kumaras confirm you are the ultimate absolute truth. The impersonalist may argue that since the Supreme Personality of Godhead was so nicely decorated, he was therefore not the absolute truth. But here it is confirmed that all the variegatedness of the Absolute Truth is constituted of Suddha Sattva, pure goodness. In the material world, any quality, goodness, passion, or ignorance, is contaminated. Even the quality of goodness here in the material world is not free from tinges of passion and ignorance. But in the transcendental world, only pure goodness without any tinge of passion or ignorance exists. Therefore, the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his variegated pastimes and paraphernalia are all pure sattva guna, or sattva guna. It's guna means a sattva means pure and transcendental form. Such variegatedness and pure goodness is exhibited eternally by the Lord for the satisfaction of the devotee. The devotee does not want to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Personality of Absolute Truth in voidness or impersonalism. In one sense, absolute transcendental variegatedness is meant only for the devotees, not for others, because this distinct feature of the transcendental variegatedness can be understood only by the mercy of the Supreme Lord and not by mental speculation or the ascending process. So there's an ascending process going from the floor up, and there's the descending process coming from the spiritual world down. It is said that one can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead when one is even slightly favored by him. Otherwise, without his mercy, a man may speculate for thousands of years and not understand what is actually the absolute truth. This mercy can be perceived by the devotee when he is completely freed from contamination. It is stated, therefore, that only when all contamination is rooted out and the devotee is completely detached from material attractions, can he receive the mercy of the Lord. Okay, so we can't understand the Lord by speculation. That's impossible. We have to have the mercy of a devotee of the Lord and be completely free from all contamination. And when all contamination is rooted out, the devotee is completely detached from material attractions. Can he receive this mercy of the Lord? Well, to root out all contamination, that's the way to do that is to always be chanting Hare Krishna and keeping your mind and your body attached to serving Krishna and actually serving, not just thinking about it, but actually doing it. Then gradually we become free of all contamination. Then we can actually receive the mercy of the Lord. He'll help us to see his transcendental form. Now, you can just walk in the temple and see the form of the Krishna, but to understand that form as Krishna is not necessarily achieved. So many people come to our temple and they look at the deity and they might be a little bit reverent, of course, but that doesn't mean you've actually seen the Lord. And the whole purpose is not that we see the Lord, in other words, we're the seer, it's that he sees us. The seer is the person that is the enjoyer. So if we go to enjoy seeing the Lord, that's different than we go to be seen by the Lord. So what is the difference? Well, the difference is that first we bow down to the Lord. He doesn't bow down to us. And then secondly, we should chant Hare Krishna and other choice mantras to glorify the Lord. And then when we begin to see the Lord, it starts from the feet up, not from the face down. We should always begin by bowing down and then meditating on his feet and his legs and his abdomen, and his neck, and face, then finally his face. Because our conception of the Lord is nil. I mean, if you have no deity, and there's no information in your scripture about the form of the Lord, you have no way of knowing what he looks like. So that's the case in Islam and in other so-called religions. There's no real information about the form of the Lord. And the Muslims will admit it. We don't have that information to have a deity. So therefore it's forbidden to speculate, and because the information is not there in the Quran. But we have the information in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, we can have a deity of the Lord, and it's bona fide by the ceremony of the Pran Pratishtha ceremony, where we actually invite the Lord to come into and it exists in the form that has been built according to the description in the Shastras. Okay. So therefore, I mean, the Muslims are also worshiping God, but their understanding of who God is not complete. And therefore, their practices are not completely pure. Like, for example, I mean, they are hardcore meat eaters, right? So even if they say they sanctify the meat by killing the animal in a certain way and bleeding it in a certain way and so forth, and it's halal, halal meat. It's not haram meat, like the Christians are eating haram meat. They don't do all these ceremonies, but the halal meat, it's been blessed by some Muslim priest. Of course, yeah, maybe there's some, let's say, some some way you might skew your understanding to think that that is the right thing to do. But the right thing to do is not to kill animals, right? And not to eat them. It's like barbaric. Even though they have their ceremonies and they have their prayers or whatever, finally, in the final point, it's actually a barbaric thing to kill a cow and eat it. And yeah, whenever Muslims would invade parts of India, the first thing they would do is kill a cow and then force the poor Indians to eat it. That way they would initiate them into Islam. You see how crazy they are. They know that, Hindus don't eat meat, so, they force them to eat meat, so they become Muslims. Is that right?
Yeah.
Huh? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, terrible. Okay, so any question? So we'll go on to text 48. Persons who are very expert and most intelligent in understanding things as they are engaged in hearing narrations of the auspicious activities and pastimes of the Lord, which are worth chanting and worth hearing. Such persons do not care even for the highest material benediction, namely liberation, to say nothing of other less important benedictions like the material happiness of the heavenly kingdom. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The transcendental bliss enjoyed by the devotees of the Lord is completely different from the material happiness enjoyed by less intelligent persons. The less intelligent persons in the material world are engaged by the four principles of benediction called Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Generally, they prefer to take the religious life to achieve some material benediction, the purpose of which is to satisfy the senses. When, by that process, they become confused or frustrated in fulfilling the maximum amount of sense enjoyment, they try to become one with the Supreme, which is, according to their conception, mukti, or liberation. There are 5 kinds of liberation, the least important of which is called sayuja, to become one with the Supreme. Devotees don't care for such liberation because they are actually intelligent, nor are they inclined to accept any of the other 4 kinds of liberation, namely to live in the same planet as the Lord, to live with him side by side as an associate, to have the same opulence, and to attain the same bodily features. They're concerned only with glorifying the Supreme Lord and his auspicious activity. Pure devotional service is Shravanam Kirtanam, hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. Pure devotees who take transcendental pleasure in hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord do not care for any kind of liberation. Even if they are offered the 5 liberations, they refuse to accept them, as stated in the Bhagavatam in the 3rd canto. Well, we are in the 3rd canto right now. Materialistic persons aspire for the sense enjoyment of heavenly pleasure in the heavenly kingdom, but devotees reject such material pleasure at once. The devotee does not even care for the post of Indra. A devotee knows that any pleasurable material position is subject to be annihilated at a certain point. Even if one reaches the post of Indra, Chandra, or any other demigod, he must be dissolved at a certain stage. A devotee is never interested in such temporary pleasure. From Vedic scriptures, it is understood that sometimes even Brahma and Indra fall down. But a devotee in the transcendental abode of the Lord never falls. This transcendental stage of life, in which one feels transcendental pleasure in hearing the Lord's pastime, is also recommended by Lord Chaitanya. When Lord Chaitanya was talking with Ramananda Raya, there were varieties of suggestions offered by Ramananda regarding spiritual realization. But Lord Chaitanya rejected all but one. That one should hear the glories of the Lord in association with pure devotees. That is acceptable for everyone, especially in this age. One should engage himself in hearing from pure devotees about the activities of the Lord. That is considered the supreme benediction for mankind. Okay, so one should engage himself in hearing from pure devotees about the activities of the Lord. That is considered the supreme benediction for mankind. So therefore, Prabhupada has written and published all these books all about Krishna, and who Krishna is, and what his activities are, and who his devotees are, and how the devotees glorify the Lord with choice prayers, and so forth. And we should every day glorify the Lord with choice prayers, like the Brahma Samhita. Ishvara Parama Vishnu Bhaktitam Vigraha Namahe Radhe Govinda Sarvakarna Karanam Chintamani Prakasadmatu Kalpavisha Lakshmi Abhipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasra Tadatam Rama Sevyamanam Govindamadipurusham tamaham bhajami. So that we should recite that every day because it's glorifying the Lord. And that's what he's saying here. One should engage himself in hearing from pure devotees about the activities of the Lord. That is considered the supreme benediction for mankind. Okay. Text 49. O Lord, we pray that you let us be born in any hellish condition of life, just as long as our hearts and minds are always engaged in the service of your lotus feet. Our words are made beautiful by speaking of your activities, just as tulsi leaves are beautified when offered unto your lotus feet. And as long as our ears are always filled with the chanting of your transcendental qualities. Very nice verse. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The four sages now offer their humility to the personality of Godhead because of their having been haughty. Haughty is like, let's look that word up. A little uppity,
Arrogantly superior.
Yes, exactly. Haughty and cursing two other devotees of the Lord, Jaya and Vijaya, the two doorkeepers who checked them from entering the Vaikuntha planet, were certainly offenders, but as Vaishnavas, the four sages, should not have cursed them in anger. After the incident, they became conscious that they had done wrong by cursing the devotees of the Lord, and they prayed to the Lord that even in the hellish condition of life, their minds might not be distracted from the engagement of service to the lotus feet of Lord Narayana. Those who are devotees of the Lord are not afraid of any condition of life, provided there is constant engagement in the service of the Lord. It is said of the Narayana Para, or those who are devotees of Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Na kutaschana bibiyati, Bhagavatam 6.17.28. They are not afraid of entering a hellish condition, for since they are engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, heaven or hell is the same for them. In material life, both heaven and hell are one and the same because they are material. In either place, there is no engagement in the Lord's service. Therefore, those who are engaged in the service of the Lord see no distinction between heaven and hell. It is only the materialists who prefer one to the other. These four devotees prayed to the Lord that although they might go to hell because they had cursed devotees, they might not forget the service of the Lord. The transcendental loving service of the Lord is performed in three ways: with the body, with the mind, and with words. Here the sages pray that their words may always be engaged in glorifying the Supreme Lord. One may speak very nicely with ornamental language, or one may be expert at controlled grammatical presentation. But if one's words are not engaged in the service of the Lord, they have no flavor and no actual use. The example is given here of tulsi leaves. The tulsi leaf is very useful even from the medicinal or antiseptic point of view. It is considered sacred and is offered to the lotus feet of the Lord. The tulsi leaf has numerous good qualities, but if it were not offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, tulsi could not be of much value or importance. Similarly, one may speak very nicely from the rhetorical or grammatical point of view, which may be very much appreciated by a materialistic audience, but if one's words are not offered to the service of the Lord, they are useless. The holes of the ears are very small and can be filled with any insignificant sound. So how can they receive a as great a vibration as the glorification of the Lord? The answer is that the holes of the ear are like the sky. As the sky can never be filled up, the quality of the air is such that one may go on pouring in vibrations of various kinds, yet it is capable of receiving more and more vibration. A devotee is not afraid of going to hell if he has the opportunity to hear the glories of the Lord constantly. This is the advantage of chanting. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One may be put in any condition, but God gives him the prerogative to chant Hare Krishna. Prerogative means like the chance, the ability to chant Hare Krishna. In any condition of life, if one goes on chanting, he will never be unhappy. So here, this is very interesting now, the way Prabhupada wrote this purport. In other words, what we can understand from this purport is, if you simply chant Hare Krishna, you are glorifying the Lord. That's what we can take from this purport. If you simply chant the Hare Krishna mantra all the time, you're glorifying the Lord. That means that, yeah, of course, you could recite all kinds of things like the Brahma Samhita and so forth, but chanting Hare Krishna is also direct glorification of the Lord. So that's good. Now, what did Haridas Thakur do? He chanted all the time. And obviously, you can't deny that he went back to Godhead. And he was this very special devotee. And he was born a Muslim, which is interesting. He became the let's say the poster child of the of chanting Hare Krishna. He was because he was chanting every day, 23 and a half hours or something like that, hardly sleeping, hardly eating, and taking care of his body. So he was a Mahabhagavat devotee. He was always focusing his mind on glorifying the Lord. And how did he glorify the Lord? Chanted Hare Krishna. So you don't have to know a lot of different mantras to glorify the Lord. You can do that also. But simply chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra with love and devotion is glorifying the Lord in the most significant way. So that's very interesting to take from this mantra, from this verse. It says, one may be put in any condition, but God gives him the prerogative, the chance, let's say, to chant Hare Krishna. In any condition of life, if one goes on chanting, he will never be unhappy. But chanting what? Chanting Hare Krishna, not Hallelujah. And so he will never be unhappy. In other words, he will be happy. Two negatives are one positive, right? So two negatives cancel out each other and it becomes positive. So here it says, he will never be unhappy. Okay. Text 50. O Lord, we therefore offer our respectful obeisances unto your eternal form as the personality of Godhead, which you have so kindly manifested before. Your supreme eternal form cannot be seen by unfortunate, less intelligent persons, but we are so much satisfied in our mind and vision to see it. The four sages were impersonalists in the beginning of their spiritual life, but afterwards, by the grace of their father and spiritual master, Brahma, they understood the eternal spiritual form of the Lord and felt completely satisfied. In other words, the transcendentalists who aspire to the impersonal Brahman or localized Paramatma are not fully satisfied and still hanker for more. Even if they're satisfied in their minds, still transcendentally, their eyes are not satisfied. But as soon as such persons come to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are satisfied in all respects. In other words, they become devotees and want to see the form of the Lord continue. It is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita that one who has developed transcendental love of Krishna by smearing his eyes with the ointment of love sees constantly the eternal form of the Lord. What?
That's the verse, right? Brahmanjana Churiti.
Yes. The particular word used in this connection, anatmanan, signifies those who have no control over the mind and senses and who therefore speculate and want to become one with the Lord. Such persons cannot have the pleasure of seeing the eternal form of the Lord. For the impersonalists and the so-called yogis, the Lord is always hidden by the curtain of Yogamaya. Bhagavad Gita says that even when the Lord Krishna was seen by everyone while he was present on the surface of the earth, the impersonalists and so-called yogis could not see him because they were devoid of devotional eyesight. The theory of the impersonalists and so-called yogis is that the Supreme Lord assumes a particular form when he comes in touch with Maya, although actually he has no form. This very conception of the impersonalists and so-called yogis checks them from seeing the Supreme Personality Godhead as he is. The Lord, therefore, is always beyond the sight of such non-devotees. The four sages felt so much obliged to the Lord that they offered their respectful obeisances unto him again and again. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the third canto, 15th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Description of the Kingdom of God. Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Ram,
Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
So, chanting Hare Krishna, you're glorifying Krishna. I never really thought of it like that, but now we have the validation that if you're always chanting Hare Krishna, you are glorifying the Lord. You don't have to chant so many other mantras. It's just this one mantra, and that's where he says, a devotee is not afraid of going to hell if he has the opportunity to hear the glories of the Lord constantly. This is the advantage of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One may be put in any condition, but God gives him the prerogative to chant Hare Krishna. In any condition of life, if one goes on chanting, he will never be unhappy. Okay, good. So that means we should chant
Hare
Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Bol, Hare Bol.
Any questions or comments online? This particular chapter is amazing, man. You get to see a preview of the actual spiritual world.
Kingdom of God. Yeah. Well, what's most, let's say, indicative of Kingdom of God? People are chanting Hare Krishna. So if we chant Hare Krishna here, we're also can experience the Kingdom of God.
Savita Mataji, you have?
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just have a comment, Prabhuji. So in today's lecture, Maharaj said, we don't go to see Krishna, but Sri Krishna looks at us. So that is my takeaway. I will say I'm very thrilled to hear this. Now, when I go to temple, I will have that mindset that Sri Krishna is going to look at me. I'm very happy with that information in today's class.
Hare Krishna. Thank
you, Mata. Any other takeaways, comments?
Yeah, so therefore, when you go to see Krishna, well, when you go to be seen by Krishna, that means you should be nicely dressed, have tilak on, and be happy and chant the glories of the Lord. And how do you chant the glories of the Lord? You just chant Hare Krishna. Krishna will be very happy to see you. Hare Bol.
I
Yes,
have
ma'am.
one question. When we say Maharaj is like when we talk about impersonalists, are there like different kinds of impersonalists? Also, like some impersonalists think that they will become God or they are God, whereas there could be some other impersonalists who know that Lord is all pervading, but they cannot become Lord and they want to be in that realm and free of miseries, but not become one with Lord. Is that the right understanding?
Well, I'm not quite sure what your question is.
Are there categories of impersonalists? I mean, I know you mentioned that there is bona fide impersonalists and there are
Unbona fide.
unbona fide who are stuck and they're not
The
open.
bona fide impersonalists are people who have guru who's gradually taking him step by step to understand Krishna. So it begins by impersonalism, right? And then it advances to personal concepts. Those are bona fide impersonalists. They have a guru who's taking them gradually from the impersonal concept to personal concept. Then you have the nonsense people, don't really have a bona fide guru, and they think that the impersonalism is the highest realization of God, and they reject the form of Krishna, or they say that the form of Krishna is material, it's not spiritual. So that would be, what you would call a nonsense person. They're talking about God, but they're insulting him at the same time. There are a lot of people who do that. They talk about God, but they're insulting God at the same time because they're giving wrong information of who he is and what he is. You know? Basically, what's being said in this purport today, purport 49 and 50, is that we should always be chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra if we want to glorify God. You don't have to, in other words, you don't even have to chant all the other mantras that glorify God. It's simply the Hare Krishna mantra. Or you can chant the Hare Krishna mantra and other mantras that glorify God. But in the case of Haridas Thakur, he simply chanted the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And he's considered the most advanced devotee. And another thing is that he was born in a Muslim family. So you see, anyone can become a pure devotee simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Even if you don't know any other mantra, that's okay. As long as you chant the Hare Krishna mantra, you are connected directly to Krishna. And if you do it with love and devotion, you are the most advanced devotee, the most advanced yogi, the most advanced person, because you actually have love and devotion for the Lord. And that's what the Lord is looking for, that love and devotion. If someone can say, well, I have love and devotion, I don't have to chant Hare Krishna. That doesn't pass the test. The test is that you chant Hare Krishna with love and devotion. Then Krishna is satisfied and pleased. Haribol. Any other questions?
Any other questions or comments?
We'll end there and continue tonight.
Yes. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, my dear devotees. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Hare Ram.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Mahamantra